In 1962, the world came closer to nuclear war than ever before. For 13 tense days, the United States and the Soviet Union stood on the brink of total destruction. This moment became known as the Cuban Missile Crisis. It began when American intelligence discovered that the Soviet Union was secretly placing nuclear missiles in Cuba, just miles away from the United States. The threat was immediate and dangerous. If these missiles became operational, they could strike major American cities within minutes. The situation created fear, tension, and uncertainty across the world. Leaders on both sides had to make critical decisions under extreme pressure. One wrong move could have triggered a global conflict unlike anything in history. The Cuban Missile Crisis remains one of the most intense and dangerous moments of the Cold War. The crisis began when American reconnaissance aircraft captured images of Soviet missile installations in Cuba. These photographs provided clear evidence that nuclear weapons were being placed within striking distance of the United States. The discovery shocked American officials and confirmed their worst fears. The information was quickly brought to President John F. Kennedy and his advisors. Meetings were held to discuss possible responses, ranging from diplomatic pressure to military action. The situation required careful analysis, as any decision could have serious consequences. The discovery marked the beginning of a tense standoff that would test the limits of leadership and strategy. After confirming the presence of Soviet missiles in Cuba, the United States had to decide how to respond. President Kennedy chose to impose a naval blockade around Cuba to prevent further shipments of military equipment. This move was intended to stop the situation from escalating while giving time for negotiations. At the same time, military forces were placed on high alert, ready for possible conflict. The Soviet Union viewed the blockade as an aggressive act, increasing tensions even further. Both sides prepared for the possibility of war while also searching for a way to avoid it. The world watched closely as the situation developed, knowing that the outcome could affect everyone. As the naval blockade took effect, the situation quickly escalated into a direct standoff between the United States and the Soviet Union. Soviet ships carrying supplies and possibly more military equipment were moving toward Cuba, while American naval forces waited to intercept them. The world watched as these ships approached the blockade line. Any confrontation at sea could trigger a chain reaction leading to full-scale war. Both sides were aware of the risks, yet neither was willing to back down. Military forces were placed on high alert and nuclear weapons were prepared for potential use. The tension during these days was intense as every movement was closely monitored. The standoff represented one of the most dangerous moments in modern history. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, fear spread across the world as people realized how close they were to nuclear war. Governments prepared for the worst, and citizens followed every update through radio and television broadcasts. Families worried about what might happen if conflict broke out. Schools practiced emergency drills, and shelters were prepared in case of attack. The possibility of nuclear war was no longer distant. It felt real and immediate. The actions of a few leaders could determine the fate of millions. This period became one of the most tense and uncertain times in history, where every decision carried enormous weight. Behind the scenes, efforts were being made to resolve the crisis through diplomacy. Secret communications took place between the United States and the Soviet Union as both sides searched for a way to avoid war. Messages were exchanged between President Kennedy and Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev. These negotiations were delicate and required careful wording to prevent misunderstandings. Each side wanted to protect its position while also avoiding escalation. The possibility of compromise slowly began to emerge. The discussions showed that even in moments of extreme tension, communication could play a key role in preventing conflict. The outcome of these negotiations would determine whether the crisis ended peacefully or led to disaster. After days of intense tension, a breakthrough was finally reached. The United States and the Soviet Union agreed on a solution that would end the crisis. The Soviet Union would remove its nuclear missiles from Cuba, while the United States agreed not to invade the island. In addition, there was a secret agreement involving the removal of American missiles from Turkey. This compromise allowed both sides to step back from the edge of war without appearing weak. The agreement marked a turning point in the crisis, showing that diplomacy could succeed even in the most dangerous situations. It was a moment that helped prevent a global disaster. With the agreement in place, the Cuban Missile Crisis began to come to an end. The removal of missiles reduced the immediate threat of nuclear conflict. Tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union slowly eased, and the world breathed a sigh of relief. The crisis had shown how close humanity had come to destruction, and it changed how both sides approached future conflicts. Measures were introduced to improve communication and reduce the risk of similar situations. The experience left a lasting impact on global politics and strategy. Today, the Cuban Missile Crisis is remembered as one of the most dangerous moments in modern history. It demonstrated how quickly tensions can escalate and how important it is to manage conflict carefully. The crisis led to changes in how global powers communicate and negotiate. It also highlighted the risks of nuclear weapons and the need for control and responsibility. The lessons learned from those 13 days continue to influence international relations today. The Cuban Missile Crisis stands as a reminder of how close the world came to disaster and how it was ultimately avoided.